Well, let's try it again. I went live, but nothing happened. Nobody joined, so I just deleted that one. We're going to start over. So we'll just see what happens here. If anybody can join in, let me know, because we do have a weak signal out here. I don't know what to do about it, but oh, there it is. Now I can see that we're going live now. Okay, good. Well, I apologize for the tardiness. I started right at 6:30 like normal. And nothing happened. It said live, but I didn't see anybody joining in. I didn't see anybody asking questions. Now I get to see some folks. I see Tom Davis, John Henry, Kim Moore. Good to see you folks. You guys know the drill. Hashtag Palm Boss Magazine. Click like, share this to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Palm Boss hat and the Palm Boss mug. Stay with me that knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. Robert McDonald's in. Good to see him. Hey, Billy Bates. I feel like you and I are becoming pretty good friends and we've never met. Chrissy Ufford Chapel. Good to see you. Mike Cottrell's checking in. Mike, have you had enough rain? Holy cow, we are hanging out in the RV in Washington County, Texas, not far from the Brazos River, about 2 miles away or maybe less than that. And it has rained huge volumes here. And I know it's rained all through Texas and points east throughout the South, quite a bit in the Midwest, Missouri, Iowa, Tennessee. You know, I know you guys have had quite a bit of rain. I see John Funk. John hasn't had much rain at all. He wants me to talk about catfish tonight. We'll give that a whirl. The old throat's getting a little bit better. Finally got some antibiotics on it. Yeah, there we are. Danny Mack says, John Henry, good to see you. I tell you how wet it's been here. They have had flash flood warnings about 5 times in the last 6 days. And when I went out this morning pretty early, I noticed something kind of gray, spotty gray on the dirt behind the RV. Mold is growing on the dirt. That's how wet it is here. So, holy cow. Yeah, we need to get me a high-speed connection. But you know what? I've tried that out here in the country, so the only option we really got is Hughes Internet, which is a satellite connection. So that's the bad news. The good news is that we're going to close on our house in Granbury, Texas, Friday. We probably won't move in for a couple of months, but once we get that done, I've been told they've got some really high-speed internet connections out there. So that ought to solve some things. I see Michael Gray checking in. Got a really cool story coming up in the next issue, the July-August issue. I started working on it over the weekend and then some today and off and on all week long. I got a couple of really interesting things to tell you guys. I did something I never do, ever. I'll tell you that in a minute. But I read through a story. Dave Beasley's got a story about a lake that Solitude's Texas office is managing here in central, actually near West Texas, over near Abilene, Albany, that area. And back during the drought, 2011 through 15, a lot of ranchers, what they do is when there's a drought, they figure out how to water their cattle. Then they come in with bulldozers and clean out ponds and tanks and lakes that have been silted in for years and years and years so they can increase the volume of water they can capture so they have livestock water. Well, while they did this on this ranch, they took the time and spent the money to go ahead and clean out a 33-acre lake and a 16-acre lake. And Paul Dorsett, who I'm known for years, Paul worked for me back in 1995 and then branched out, started his own business. Then he sold his business to Solitude several years ago. And he came up with a stocking plan. Now, the stocking plan for that 33-acre lake was to stock it with 1,000 bluegill, fingerlings, 250 red ear sunfish, and 10 pounds of fathead minnows per acre for that 33-acre lake. Then the landowner wanted to get some bass to grow fast, so he kind of took charge of stocking after that. Told Paul he wanted 500 pure strain Florida bass. That's 15 bass per acre. If you stock 15 bass per acre, your catch rates are going to be poor, but your growth rates are going to be astonishing. Well, 2 years later, Paul was electrofishing that lake to check the status of it. Shocked up quite a few 3 3/4 to 5 pound bass at 2 years old. Now, a 5 pound bass after 2 years old is huge. I don't care where you are in the United States. But they shocked up one bass. Now this lake had gone completely dry. They shocked up one bass that weighed a little over 10 pounds. Well, they captured that bass about a month ago, weighed it and measured it. They moved it to another lake, along with 17 of the other superior fish, to get the genesis of a bass population into this new 17-acre lake on that same ranch. That bass now weighs 14 pounds plus at 4 years of age. The story about that will be in the next issue of Pond Boss magazine. You know, I've been helping a guy named Greg Graves over south of Kansas City. Helped him design about a 60-acre lake. Started working with him probably 7 years ago. So the first story in a series of stories about his lake will be coming up in the next issue of Pond Boss as well. But the interesting thing about his lake is we overstocked it with bass just so we could get a higher percentage of female bass to grow really, really fast and then start culling early. Now what will happen in this lake in West Texas, they're already culling bass because that 10-pounder reproduced last year and then again the year before and then this year. So they're going to be culling fish because there's not enough big bass in there to keep the numbers down. So they're going to be culling along the same rate we are. We captured a couple of, I think I told this last week, but two bass that are 2 years old that were knocking on the door like 2 ounces shy of 5 pounds in Missouri. That's super growth rates. So you'll be able to read about both these lakes in the next issue of Pond Boss. Now, I'd gotten a call from a guy who had bought a hunting ranch outside of Jacksboro, Texas. And he wanted me to come take a look at a lake and some ponds and then see if I could help him come up with a stocking plan. And his goals are fairly simple. They sell hunts, and then he likes to hunt and fish. So he said, hey, why don't you plan on bringing a bunch of fish? I said, no, let's go take a look at it first. We'll come up with a stocking plan, and then, you know, we might need to, you know, and I thought I would be able to ask him some questions about the history of each pond and each lake. Well, there were 5 ponds that are really small, anywhere from 1/10 of an acre up to maybe an acre. And then his bigger lake's probably 10 acres. So I always look up the owner before I go meet him. Well, I didn't do that this time. I had no idea who this guy was. I was pretty embarrassed when he got out of the truck and I started thinking, okay, now I should know who this is. Well, his name is Fletcher Cox. He's a fantastic NFL football player for the Philadelphia Eagles, and I was a little embarrassed to not know who he was, but I haven't followed the NFL in a couple of years. I haven't really paid attention, and I've never really singled out Philadelphia as one of my teams to follow. But anyway, I got to spend time with him, and we started working on a game plan. We're going to have to go electrofish his lake, see what's in it, and then figure out a stocking plan. I thought that was kind of fun. Okay, so let's see here. John Funk needs range. I'm going to talk about catfish for you in a minute, John Funk. Let's see what we got. Michael Gray. Now, Michael's got a really good story as well about having a collar a spring that he could not figure out how to get into this lake that he built. It's a very entertaining and informative story that's going to be coming up in the July. So here's the bottom line. If you haven't subscribed to Pond Boss magazine, here's the latest issue right there. If you haven't subscribed, it's $35 for a year. Billy Bates, say it with me. It's cheaper than a Friday night date. And it lasts a year. Most subscribers I talk to say that they get at least one usable nugget out of every issue of the magazine. And one of the things we try to do is make you better stewards of your land and water and try to help you keep from paying the dumb tax. Speaking of articles coming up in the next issue, I read through Dan Van Skyke's article today, and there's some new things about how to manage, I'd like to use the word control, but that's not possible, how to manage feral hogs on your rural property. So that would be really, really good to read about. So let's see here. Ashton Hunter, Chrissy Cheppel, no rain in Alabama. Look at there, Fred Bingham's sipping a little bit of Bell Mead 108 proof. You know what? If I had some, I'd sip it with you, but I'm a little short right now. Plus, I've started a little program that It's do or die, shed pounds or lose weight. So shed pounds or lose weight. Yeah, that's true. Or die from it. So I'm kind of backing off on the adult beverages except for vodka a little bit. Ashton Hunter, what's your thoughts on wrapping pallets with chicken wire for habitat on spawning flats for fry? I would not do that. I would do the pallets. The chicken wire, if you ever throw a lure in it, you're hung up and you're going to break off because you can't move it. So I think the pallets are a great idea. You know, the interstitial space, if you were to say nail 12 or 13 pallets together and put them out there and submerge them in water 8 or 10 feet deep, along with some other elements for habitat, I think that's a good idea. But if you put chicken wire on there to protect the fish in there, then it becomes impossible to catch fish out of. And if those fish are going to be in there, the chicken wire is not going to make them want to stay in there longer. They either are or they're not. And the best way to mitigate that decision for them, or that Pavlov's dog's choice for them, that conditioned choice, is to surround the pallets with some other things like brush piles, rock piles, piles of concrete 8-aught blocks, things like that. Mike McPherson, Indiana. Mike Fornash. Chrissy saying, I need recommendations on whether to add plants to my pond for increased aeration cover or not. If so, zone 8, about 1 acre pond. Chrissy, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to presume it's a new pond, and if so, nature's going to provide you some vegetation. Now, vegetation needs 3 things to grow. It needs the right temperature, which you have no control over, and right now is a good temperature. You got to have nutrients, which that's going to be in the soil, and you got to have sunlight. So if the water's clear enough, there's some food in the soil and the mud at the bottom of the pond, and the temperature's right, something's going to grow. Now, if you want to plant something, I would plant like some eelgrass or one of the pondweed species that's native to where you live. I like small leaf pondweed, American pondweed, Illinois pondweed. I'm not as big a fan of bushy pondweed, because it gets a little bit too dense. Believe it or not, this cough is finally going away. Whatever that's been clogging me up is coming out. So I would let nature do what nature's going to do. Now, if you want to plant something, I would make an exclusion cage and plant it in the exclusion cage so that fish or turtles won't dig it up. Now, if you want to make an exclusion cage out of 1 by 2 inch welded wire, if you don't want to spend much money, do it out of chicken wire in this case. But after your plants get established and begin to spread, then remove that exclusion cage. You just want to give those plants some protection so they can grow. Hey, Kenny Sanderson, checking in. He spends a lot of time on the Pond Boss website. Discussion forum. Trevor Fry, good to see Trevor. Quentin Tabolka, will crushed granite work better or just as well as pea gravel? I'll tell you what I think about that. I think pea gravel is the best. Sand is the second best. If crushed granite or crushed rock are your other choices, then use it. But here's the caveat. The thing I don't like about crushed granite, crushed limestone, it's abrasive. And when those bluegill come and start sweeping out that beds, I've seen them literally get cut up by the rocks. Now, after those rocks get covered a little bit in sediment, a little bit in algae growing on them, it kind of changes that. It gets rid of some of those sharper edges. But I have seen bluegills get abraded enough that it created some issues for those fish. Trevor Fry, we caught a male copper-nosed bluegill this week. Trevor, you and I probably ought to have a conversation at some point, because your thought process is farther ahead than most, and I'd like to talk about it. We caught a male copper-nosed bluegill this week that had yellow tips on its fins. I think I saw that picture. Is this common during the spawn, or is this possibly some green sunfish DNA? I'm going to tell you this. I've never seen a copper-nosed bluegill with yellow tips on its fins, ever. Not one. So, and I've seen hundreds of thousands, literally, I've seen millions of copper-nosed bluegill. Never seen one with yellow tips on its fins. That suggests to me that there has been some outbreeding somewhere in that fish's history. Now, I'm not going to say that it's not a pure copper-nosed genetic mutant, but I've just never seen it. So my gut reaction would be there's probably some green sunfish genetics in it, where that one may have reproduced with a male, or is the result of a male hybrid sunfish crossing with a female copper-nosed bluegill, and that's what the offspring look like. That could be that. So it could be like an F2, F3, FX hybrid somewhere down the line. Robert McDonald, our community HOA, refuses to fund aeration for our 2-acre lake. We had a kill of big largemouth bass last summer. At what oxygen level do largemouth bass start to die? I'm going to tell you that your HOA needs to buy the aeration system. If not, you guys need to pool your funds and go do it. The direct answer is largemouth bass, they don't begin to die. They die when the dissolved oxygen drops below 3.0, somewhere around 2.5, 2.6, they suffocate. Now, I know this. I've literally tracked bass living in a thermocline to seek cooler water where the dissolved oxygen level was right at 3 parts per million. So at 3, they can live. But here's what happens. When there's an oxygen depletion that goes low enough for bass to die, it usually happens at daylight as a result of some stimulus, whether it's the pond turned over because of a heavy rainstorm, there's too much aquatic biomass, too much aquatic plant biomass that's consuming too much oxygen through the course of the night. It can be because of a plankton crash. There's a number of reasons that can cause dissolved oxygen to plummet. But it's only, how long can you hold your breath? That's a little bit longer than a bass can hold its breath. You know, bass have got to continue. There's a great article coming out in the next issue of Pond Boss. Hey, have I told you about that? $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date. Dr. Claude Boyd, the world's leading, he's the preeminent water quality expert for the aquaculture industry, has an article on each issue. He's got one coming up in July, August that explains how this happens. But what happens is all a bass needs is all most fish need, are about 15 to 20 minutes at the most of lower lethal dissolved oxygen to suffocate, die, and they're gone. It can happen in 5 minutes. So even if the oxygen plummets and then comes right back up in 20 minutes, it's too late. They're dead. You know, so aeration can help solve that problem. And for a 2-acre pond, you're talking about spending $2,000. You know, and so tell me how much those dead bass were worth. Compare that to the cost of an aeration system. No, wait, don't even tell me how much the bass were worth. Tell me how much the time that it took those bass to grow up was worth. 4 years worth? 5 years worth? And it's going to take that much to replace those fish that died. So, you know, $2,000, $2,500, $1,800, whichever system you pick for a 2-acre pond will pay for itself if it prevents one fish kill. Doug Brown, evaluation please. Stocked F1s, December 3, 2020. Finally caught 2 this weekend. The first one was 12 inches, 9 ounces. Second one was 12 inches, 10 ounces. I'm having a very difficult time getting my local store to order Aquamax largemouth feed. Let me see here. As well as recently been diving the pond and finding a great population of hybrid bluegills from breeder size down to fry. Been implementing habitat for smaller bait and feel I'd like to add more bait additional to bluegill. We have as well implement some genetics on the bass side. Probably best I consult with you on prior to anything. Okay. Now let me kind of let's address the feed issue first. Kenny Sanderson has been having a hard time getting fish food from his feed dealer in Goodland, Kansas. They'll only order a pallet, so there's no demand for it. Okay, you know what? That's really, really aggravating. And I need to, Kenny, I've been traveling the last few days since you and I spoke, So I'm going to follow up a little bit with Purina. They don't have to buy a pallet of anything. Now, I don't quite understand sometimes how Purina does things, but I know this. There are feed stores all over the nation that have, like all the Aquamax fish foods, I say all of them, whatever they sell the most of, on the floor. Also know this, there's a distribution system. Even though that fish food may be milled in Mississippi or Texas or Ohio, they've got distribution centers scattered all over the nation with trucks going to and from all the time. So I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around a dealer that's telling you that he can't get it, and then there's a salesperson that's telling this dealer the same thing. So I've been talking to the higher ups at Purina to figure out what the problem is, but I haven't followed up with them. I'll do that tomorrow. But I wish I had a great answer. I don't, because Purina's had trouble with distribution in years past. They usually work to fix it. And another one of the big issues Purina's got is not all their dealers are strictly Purina dealers. A lot of their dealers sell other feeds. They sell other brands of feed. And so the loyalty back and forth to me sometimes doesn't look mutual. It looks like if that dealer's loyal, then the provider, the producer, is going to be loyal. But I don't know those politics, and I don't get it. And I'm not giving you a good answer on how to get the fish food. Your 12-inch, 9-ounce fish from a December 3 stocking, if those fish were 3 to 5 inches long, which they probably were, that's about what you'd expect. You would expect the top side of those fish with plenty of food. By the time you get to the fall, the top end will be 2 1/4, 2.5 pounds. Most of them will be 1 1/4 to 1 3/4. Any recommendations on a reputable fish hatchery in East Texas to find already grown Florida and F1 bass to add to our 13-acre pond? That, I tell you, fish have become quite an elusive commodity lately. I would go to pondboss.com, click on the resource guide, and start checking in with some of those fish farms and fish providers in the resource guide. There's going to be American Sport Fish Hatchery. There's going to be Overton's over in Buffalo, Texas. Frankly, quite a few of the fish dealers buy fish from producers, which that's okay as long as you know what you're getting. That's not a big deal at all. I've been culling bass for 2 years now, starting to see an increase in relative weights, as well as been racing Diamond the Pond with. Okay, holy cow! I married those two together. Okay. Let's see. I'm married two things here. Doug Brown. Tomorrow I'll try to find out answers about fish food. Okay, Ashton Hunter. The main thing to do is keep pushing your food chain. Stock threadfin shad in that lake, because you're in East Texas. If you're looking, be sure that you're stocking threadfin shad. Be sure you can see at any given time 4 to 6 size classes of bluegill. Keep weighing and measuring fish, comparing them to standard. If you'll do that, then you can keep that thing on a good track. Philip Benefield, I hear folks talk about catching male and female fish. How do you tell the difference? You spread their fins and look. Oh no, I'm sorry. Sorry. No, I'll tell you, this time of year they're pretty easy to tell, because especially when you're talking about sunfish, the males are dark colored. Sunfish like bluegills, the scales are tipped in black, and the females' bellies are bulging full of eggs. Now, the bluegills, depending on where you are, they're going to spawn several times a year. If you're up where Drew Hay and Philip Hay live, I saw Philip on there a while ago, they may spawn twice a year. So they'll lay their eggs and then start developing eggs and lay them one more time before the summer's out. But here in Texas, they may spawn 5 times a year. We may get our first spawn bluebird days in February and get the next one in early April, the next one in mid-May, next one in June, and again late September, and then one in October, November. So that's the way that works. Female bass, if it's 2.5 pounds or bigger, you can pretty well tell it's a female. Most male largemouth bass don't get much larger than 1.25 pounds. They're almost always underweight, long and slender. But if you spread their fins and look, a female has got a vent. And this time of year, it's typically pink and it's a little slit. And then when you look at the male, there's just a little papilla. Look that word up. Just a little bulb that protrudes from his vent area a little bit. So, I hope that didn't get us banned from Facebook, talking about sex on the air here. Billy Bates says, why won't certain species of fish eat good, high-quality pellet? Understand crappie are not typically pellet fed, but I've seen on multiplications both your favorite feed and Bruce's favorite feed hit a crappie right on the nose and just acts if it's a sweaty teenager's sock after an August football practice. I love that analogy. Yeah, I think I'd spit out that sock too. Well, the thing about fish eating fish food, there's some fish such as bluegill, minnows, hybrid stripers. Hybrid stripers are conditioned to it from the get-go. But if the other predator type fish, specifically crappie and largemouth bass, and even red-eared sunfish eat crustaceans for a living. But if they're not conditioned to eat that feed when they're young, they're not going to do it because they don't know what it is. They're used to chasing something alive. So that's a matter of conditioning. It's like if you catch a wild dog, you catch a coyote, you try to teach it how to sit, it's just going to try to get your hand off because it doesn't know what that means. Same thing. Those pellets are like giving a coyote a command. They don't get it because they're predators and they weren't conditioned to it. Now what Bruce does is he's got a schedule that's conducive to conditioning his fish. So he can go down there before work, he can go in there at lunch because he lives 5 miles from where he works, and he can go down there after work and he can work with those fish and condition them day in, day out to get them trained to come to his dock, and then he'll feed them, and he starts them off with live food. He'll feed them bluegills, and then once he starts feeding them bluegills, then they graduate. They go from pre-K to kindergarten, and now all his fish are in the NFL. Speaking of NFL. So, that's how that works. Now, I'm not going to tell you that some crappie and some bass won't figure out how to eat pellets. But I'll tell you this, it'll be something less than 1% of the overall population will finally figure it out. And it's because they're mimicking what the bluegill are doing or whatever the fish are doing that are eating your fish food. So Nick Allen says, Ron Ardoin took out 75 pounds of bluegill. That's a good move. And I hope you took out the smaller of the bigger ones when you took those out. And I hope you sold them for about 12 or 15 bucks a pound because that's what they're worth right now. They're in short supply. What's your thoughts on catching and keeping bluegill while on the nest or just off the nest? We've been hitting them hard year after year and wondering if it's ever going to catch up with us and hurt the populations. 6 Acre Lake, nice bluegill, average 9 to 10 inches and always throw the large males back and large red ear. I'll tell you this. My opinion is if your primary goal is to produce food for your largemouth bass, let the bluegills on the nest stay on the nest. Because typically the bluegills that are on the nest are the best ones and the biggest ones. So if you can go catch the next size down, like if you're catching 9 to 10 inch bluegill off the nest and you're taking them out, then what you're doing is inviting the 6 and 7 inch bluegill to come in and take over the nest. Once they do that, their growth rate's going to plummet. They're not going to get nearly as big as they would have if you leave those bigger fish on the nest. So there's 2 good reasons to leave the biggest ones on the nest. One is to allow them an uninterrupted chance to reproduce, to produce food for your bass. The second reason is to force the younger bluegills to get bigger than they are. Now once you start catching some 10, 11, and 12 inch bluegill, start taking out some 9s. That's fine. But if you want to harvest some now, take some that are 6 to 8 inches long and throw the males back. I think that's a good idea. Would you raise bluegill and tilapia in the same hatchery pond? I've done that. Yes, I would. How many times will the tilapia spawn? Over and over and over. They're not inhibited by space, and bluegill are not as inhibited by space as a bass is or other fish. But you will see lots and lots and lots of babies. Now, if you're going to raise them in a hatchery pond, be prepared to harvest. You know, and one of the things I do, or I've done with my hatchery ponds that I sold, I would go in about once a month and take a seine and just sample and see what I had. You know, if I got a whole bunch of fish like that swimming through the net, I'm going to keep feeding them, keep pouring the feed to them, give them another month, do it again. And then once I start seeing a crop that's harvestable, then we'll start harvesting some to make room for the rest to get a little bit bigger. You know, and toward the end of the year, tilapia are going to die. You know, Jeff is over in North Carolina, so Jeff, I know tilapia are going to die in the wintertime over there. So I would harvest them at the right size to serve the purpose that you want to serve for your bass lake. There's Jerry Siebert checking in from Oregon. I think he's the only Republican that I've met that lives in that state. Bob Mayer, greetings from Aiken, South Cackalack. Just got my first magazine for my subscription. Great stuff. Welcome, Bob. If you got questions, man, throw them up here. Let's see here. Drew Hay is checking in. 7:05. You know, I'm gonna stop a minute, and I've got to thank our sponsors. And you know, I love working with Purity Mills, best fish food on the market. We are going to have a little come to Jesus talk about distribution, so I can get some answers. If you guys will be watching the Facebook page for Pond Boss, I'll get you some answers about distribution and find out where this is coming from. If there's a salesman out there spreading that information, he's probably focused on horses and cattle, doesn't understand fish. So I will find out the truth on that. I'll call David Nelson tomorrow, and I'll call Michael Schlegel in at Gray Summit and find out the truth. Get that out there. But I love Purina's Fish Foods. I've been a fan. I've been loyal to them. I've seen great results with their fish food. My favorite's Aquamax MVP. Because you can feed all the different species of fish that eat fish food. 9 different pellet sizes. And one of the things I love about that feed, I got to help develop it. They did it. I got to help plant the idea 10 years ago. But what happens is out of the 9 pellets, about 30% of those pellets slowly drift down through the water column. The rest of them float. So the most aggressive fish can feed at the surface like they do anyway, but what you don't see is the fish that are underneath there that aren't getting the nutrition that they need sometimes. So MVP gives fish a legitimate shot at that fish food all the way up and down through the water column. I also love Texas Hunter products. Great fish feeders. That's the only kind I use now. I love them. I love their customer service. I love the product. I love how well it works. If there's ever an issue, I mean, I sent an email to Chris Blood the other day. My son's feeder, I went and tested it. The battery said good on it. Well, I thought maybe one of the motors was out, and I sent an email to Chris. He said, no, it's a dead battery. The next day we had a battery, fixed it, plugged it in, there it went. Nick Allen, good bass population to which keeps overpopulation. Yeah, okay, I got it, yep. You got to control bass numbers to keep bluegill numbers growing bigger too. Jacob, driving Amarillo, listen to my weekly fix. Hello, everybody, good to see Jacob. Watch the highway, dude. Also, I want to let everybody know about the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology. Now, once we get settled in Granbury and I learn how to play that game, they've got a conference center and like 18 hotel rooms, ponds all over that place, the river and Lake Granbury out there. We may host one there. I just got to learn how to play the game. But in the meantime, you can access the Institute of Higher Pondology online. Now, you got to pay for it, but I promise you, what you get from that will help keep you from paying the dumb tax. And I got an email from a guy today that was telling me how it took him 3 years to begin to figure out what he should have done. And by that time, he'd already done some things he wished he'd done different. So he was paying the dumb tax. We'll help coach you through that. There's 22 videos in 6 different modules from a variety of topics. You can look at those, and the price ranges from $79 up to $495 for all of them. So find that by going to pondboss.teachable.com. You can click on that, it'll come right up, you can see it and jump right in there and go. And something else we're working on, some new videos for that institute set. And we evaluated a couple of lakes. We've got got a video coming up on how to feed fish. We've got one on evaluating lakes. We've got one on how to evaluate your fish. So we got something coming up. Let's see what else. I'm going to talk about catfish here in just a second. Nick Allen says, we've got the lake to grow a state record bluegill and red ear. What can we do to beef them up even more and produce a potential state record? We just pulled 11 3/4 inch red ear Sunday, wanting that 12 inches or more. Nick, I'm going to tell you, you need to know what that fish eats and provide it. Red ear are shell crackers. If you study what's going on over in Arizona, Lake Havasu, where they're catching 3 to 5 pound, a 6 pound plus red ear was caught, it's because they're abundant quagga mussels. Now, don't stock quagga mussels, but if you want to grow a bigger red ear, you need to be able to provide them with food, which usually means not taking out all your plants. It's not that they eat plants, it's just that snails eat plants, red ears eat snails. So therefore, bushy pondweed is fantastic for red ears to grow their kind of food. Nick, you can send me an email and I can throw you some more stuff. As a matter of fact, if you will spend the money to do that Institute of Higher Pondology, you're going to see some answers right there as well. Billy Bates, even my biggest bluegill, 9 to 11 inches, seem to prefer the smallest fingerling size feed over the smallest size MVP pellet. These pieces are barely bigger than a grain of sand. I was thinking of buying maybe one of the grower feeds next, which is a bit bigger. If you're going to do that, go to 500. Do 500. Because 500, here's the problem with keeping those big bluegill on smaller pellets. It takes a lot of energy to ingest enough of them to fill their bellies. If they can get what they need in 7 or 8 attacks, of larger pellets, then they spend less energy, which makes their conversion rate go up, which gives them better top-end potential later on down the road. So I would go ahead, I know this, they're not going to go hungry. So if they're not eating those bigger pellets, it's not because they can't, it's because they're getting enough. I'm not telling you back off on the feed, but I'm going to tell you I've seen lots and lots and lots of 9 to 11 inch bluegill suck in Aquamax 600 pellets, which is the top size pellets in MVP. Danny Mack says, I switched from a smaller pellet to a bass pellet. The bluegills won't mess with the little stuff anymore. Yep, okay, so Danny Mack switched to that 3/8, I think is Aquamax 600. Now be sure you buy the fish meal based fish food. You need that high-end, outstanding fish food for what you want to do. All right, talking about catfish. I've had several people ask about catfish. Catfish supplies are usually pretty easy to get. Now, prices have gone up, but the thing about catfish is they're easy. They're easy to raise. Now, if you want to grow catfish, the first thing I'm going to ask you is why. Now, most of the people I talk to, I'm going to tell you 9 out of 10 people say, I want catfish for meat. On a rare occasion, somebody says, I want catfish just so I can catch catfish for sport. That's not common. Now, there's been a little bit of a trend toward people that want to try to grow huge catfish like blue cat. Now, keep in mind that you can grow blue cat 30 to 50 pounds in a 3 or 4 acre pond. And you're going to have 3 of them because they're pretty much going to eat everything else that's in there. So you need to understand the game. Now, blue cat, for example, are top-line predators that can be conditioned to eat fish food when they're small. Now, if you go catch a 60-pound blue cat out of your local public lake that's notorious for blue cats like Lake Texoma or Lake Tawakoni, they've been making a living off of gizzard shad. So you got to understand how that fish performs, what it takes for it to grow, and you got to provide that. But with channel cat, for example, they're easy. You can grow those on fish food. I mean, at LL2, before we sold the place, we had a 1 acre pond, not quite an acre, that we used to grow catfish for meat and for kids to catch their first big fish. And I would stock 200 to 500 4 to 8 inch fingerlings in there, feed them, and within 8 months I had 1.5 pound catfish big enough to eat. So they're really, really easy to grow. They eat the cheaper fish food. You don't have to feed those that high price fish food. You can feed them grain-based fish food, and they're going to do fine. Now, some folks will say, hey, I'd like to have bluegill in there with them. Well, if you do that, stock hybrid sunfish with channel catfish. Now, if you have bass in there, if you want to add catfish as a value-added fish, stock catfish big enough to not get eaten by your average size bass. Expect attrition. If you put in 200, expect 50 of those to go away within a year and a half. Whether it's somebody in there ate them, Stampin' Turtle caught one, River Otter got one, snakes ate a few when they were small, there's going to be attrition. So plan for that. Look at them as a put and take fish. You're going to put them in, feed them up, get them big, take some out. And what you need to do is pay attention to how many fish of what size you've got that are coming to the feed. So if you know you started with, say, 100 in a half-acre pond, and once those things are averaging 3 pounds, you've got 300 pounds of fish in a half-acre pond. You know, that means you got 600 pounds per acre. Your pond can likely sustain, if you have an aeration system, 800 pounds to 1,000 pounds per acre before you start paying the price. Now, paying the price means if you're not harvesting those fish, Mother Nature's going to do it for you. Because if you continue to feed them and they continue to grow and you're not harvesting any, you'll get to the point where you're feeding them and their feed conversion rate is 2.22 to 1, 2.2 to 1, something like that. There's enough waste coming into the water that it can foul the water. When that happens, then you're going to have issues. Because as the waste collects and the water can't process it, your water quality deteriorates and nature makes a correction with a fish kill. And I know you named all those fish, and you see Uncle Tommy out there, Scarface, and they're all swimming upside down, not moving. You don't want to do that. So look at catfish as a put and take, feed them up, grow them up, take some out, stock more later to keep recruitment going. But catfish are the easiest fish out there to raise. All right, let's see what else we got here. Jason Nipstead, let me see if I missed something. Okay, Ashton Hunter is going to sign up for the Pondology course Friday. I love it. Thank you very much for doing that. And let us know how it goes. And once you're in, if you buy the whole thing at $4.95, when you buy the whole thing, then you're in it for life, and any new videos and any module you'll have access to. It's really, really worth it. Let's see what Jason says here. Jason Nipstead from Fayetteville, North Carolina. I wanted to cry the other day when I saw a baby chain pickerel, then my neighbor caught one yesterday. Anything I can do to assist their exit from the lake? Also, how much of a problem will they become trying to grow big bass? You know what? In those blackwater lakes like where you live, I don't really see them as a problem. I don't. They're going to live up in the shallow water near grass as much as they can. And they're going to feed lower down on the food chain. Yeah, they'll compete with bass, but they're not going to outcompete bass. You know, so they'll eat some of the same food that bass eats, but that doesn't mean that they're going to eradicate the food that bass eats. So I look at them as coexisting, kind of like what Jerry Siebert's doing in Oregon right now. I hope you're laughing at that. Danny Mac, what do I do with my last 4 channels weighing over 12 pounds each, with each having several names depending on who watches them? They're fat on bass feed, gulp, gulp. I'll tell you what you need to do with them. Since you've already got names, and they're already named, give them the honor of dying at a ripe old age of whatever that is. That's what I would do. I wouldn't worry too much about it. You know, something's going to happen. But in the meantime, feed them up. I'll tell you what I do with a 12-pound catfish. I'd see how long it would take to get it to 15 pounds. When and how, Nick Allen says, when and how can you tell if the bluegill are crossbreeding with a red ear? When you look at a bluegill, there's vertical stripes almost all the time on bluegill. Now, they're a little harder to see in female bluegills. When you look at a red ear sunfish, it's more... What was that? It's more speckled looking. So the way that I see that, I just got distracted. It's when you see a bluegill cross with a red ear. Look at the gill flap first. It'll be blue, but there'll be a little bit of hint of yellow or even a little bit of red on that gill flap. Look at that, and that fish, even though it'll have the traits of a bluegill, it will also be kind of speckled. And when I say speckled, I mean evenly speckled all across, up and down the body. It won't have the stripes at all. It'll be speckled like a red ear. Its body shape will be more like a bluegill. Billy Bates. Hey, honey. Oh, I just heard something I don't like. Did you just hear something?
I see smoke.
Okay, we got to go. Bye. I'll check you later. Where is it? Where? Coming out of what line?
The light up there. No, get there. Right there. It's not coming from there. It's coming from...
Okay, start getting up and getting out of here. Hurry, hurry, get out.
Really something, girlfriend.
Yeah, go. Get your stuff. I don't want to take any chances. Start just getting your stuff, get it out, put it in the truck. Everything.
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking there's so much may be on fire. Get your shoes on.
Should we call something?
And we'll
I want my shit to burn down and lose all my stuff.
start getting it out. Go.
Call John. Get him over here right now. I think you ought to turn everything off.